with our success, I think a lot of teams kind of circle us on their schedule, but that's what you want, man. If you're not answering the bell every single week, I mean, why are we out there, right?
First of all, they got good players. They got a really good coach, and this will be their first home game. I just think all of those things added up, we're going to get everything that they have in this particular game. I think we're going to get it all at once.
We can't go into this game taking it lightly, especially it being an away game.
I'm trying to be the best on every single play, every single game, so it's not new to me to feel like everyone's getting everybody's best shot.
The Chiefs began the season with a tough challenge, 2 games in 5 days. Well, they emerged from that stretch with a perfect record. In fact, the Chiefs are one of just 3 undefeated teams in the AFC. And now, fresh off an extended break, they have a chance to keep things rolling against an old foe in the Indianapolis Colts. We are 2 hours from kickoff. You've waited all week for this very moment. It's finally here. It is time for football in Chiefs Kingdom. Let's do this. My name is Matt McMullen, joined by voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus. This is Field Pass presented by StorageMart. And Mitch, what a start. 2 wins in 5 days, but back to work here today.
Yeah, for sure. And they're facing a dangerous and desperate foe that has a lot of pride. So that's the biggest challenge of the day. But the Chiefs are off to a good start. A couple reasons. Run-pass option to me on the offensive side. There's been balance and a quick start. They've stayed ahead of the chains. And then defensively, they're getting teams off the field. 6 out of the 23 drives have been 3 and outs. That's a drastic change from the last 4 years.
Yeah, this defense has a lot of momentum coming into this game. And let's talk about the pass rush specifically, because they were awesome last week against the Chargers. They pressured Justin Herbert on 18 of his dropbacks, 8 quarterback hits in that game, and 7 different players had a quarterback hit. So it wasn't just one guy. Everybody got in on the action. That pressure was swarming, and it's a big reason why we won last week.
And 5 different guys on the defensive front 7. Those weren't just blitzes. They didn't create pressure with scheme. They created it with effort and athletic ability. That's another big difference for the Chiefs. Steve Spagnuolo does not have to always dial up some exotic blitz to get pressure. That's a big step up for this team.
Now, I do want to ask you about creative schemes here, because no Willie Gay in this game at linebacker. Bit of a bummer. We know how good Willie is, how important he is on this defense. They call him the juice man for a reason. He brings energy out there. Darius Harris at linebacker is the next man up, may get a start here today. If you don't know much about him, he's actually been around a while. He was an undrafted free agent signee way back in 2019, only started 2 games. This would be his 3rd start if he starts here today. But in the linebacker room, he actually knows the scheme better than anyone in terms of longevity. So he knows what he's doing. Nick Bolton said that he plays with energy as well and knows the scheme like the back of his hand. But it goes beyond just Darius. We could see Spags maybe dial up some creative schemes here today as well with maybe the safeties.
Yeah, if you get time before you listen to the radio broadcast, find our defending the kingdom. The apples doesn't equal apples. We think it's got to be one guy equaling Willie Gay Jr.'s absence. It's not. Mostly Darius Harris, yes, who had a big moment in the 2020 season. Remember his play against Atlanta late? It was huge. Okay, other than that, though, Leo Chanel's entering this picture. So does Elijah Lee. So do extra safeties. Spags like to play extra safeties, but these Chief safeties are physical and athletic. They can play the run and the pass. They become a key part of the element of replacement for Willie Gay Jr.'s absence.
And that's why you have depth on this defense. And I think last week was a testament to the depth on this defense when Trent McDuffie couldn't go, of course placed on IR with that hamstring injury. You worry about that going into a game against the Chargers, but no problem. Jalen Watson steps up, a 7th-round pick, a rookie, comes in and makes the play of the game. I think when we look back on this season, that's going to be one of the plays of the season as well, that 99-yard pick 6 that just changed everything for the Chiefs. And that didn't just say a lot about the depth on this team, also said a lot about the communication and the cohesiveness, I think, on this defense, because the Chargers were going tempo there, right? Justin Herbert's getting guys to the line quickly. The defense didn't panic, though, and Watson was right there to make a big play.
Yeah, they face challenges today because it's different. It's the don't bite on the play action fake. The Colts will try to go over the top some, and with Michael Pittman Jr. back, that gives them a deep threat in this game. But they know those corners, and they're involved in the run defense too. And with Jonathan Taylor, the premier runner in this league, the corners have got to think both. but you cannot bite on the play fake and let Pittman or somebody else get over the top.
Yeah, it was just so exciting to see because we knew all offseason, we talked about this. This defense has so much potential, but you can't really know until they're in a game situation. Patrick Mahomes talked about that last week. You can have faith in these guys, but you can't know how they're going to react until they're in a game. Well, now we know. We saw it in a huge primetime game. We saw how these guys work together, and it was very exciting stuff. Now, you mentioned Jonathan Taylor. I want to ask you about him because he's quite a challenge for this young defense here today. One of the best runners in the NFL, just an absolute beast last season. Led the NFL in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and scrimmage yards. He was also explosive. This guy had 50 runs last year of at least 10 yards. So he's not just a bruiser inside. He is that, but he's also explosive at the second level. Kind of a strange season for him so far, though. Really wasn't working for him too much in week 1 in the first half. Came on in the second half. Finished that game with 161 rushing yards and a touchdown. Last week was really weird, though, against Jacksonville. They fell behind early, just 10 touches in that game. Never really got going. Don't let that fool you, though. We'll see him a lot here today, and Nyheim Hines as well out of the backfield. Both those guys are dangerous.
Yeah, a couple things here. Taylor last year won the rushing title by 550 yards. It just tells you how much he's separated, and you mentioned the long runs. They want to establish him early. They have not been able to do that in the first 2 weeks of the season. It's been the problem. Hines is interesting here. He's the better pass receiver, but here's what I expect today from the Colts, Matt, and that is playing both of those guys at the same time. They will try to force Steve Spagnuolo into 3 linebackers, going bigger, maybe keeping a safety out of the game, and then throwing to Hines. They will try to get him on mismatches or also try to throw to Taylor. Some of those may be screens or some middle routes. Hines can go deep routes. It's a challenge for Steve Spagnuolo when both of those RBs are in the lineup at the same time.
Yeah, don't forget about Hines. He actually leads this team in receptions right now with 10, so Matt Ryan will be looking his way. Both Taylor and Hines are big weapons for Matt Ryan. Let's talk about him a little bit. 15th season as a pro. He's been around forever. His first season here in Indianapolis, and there were a lot of high hopes about him coming here. He could be the guy that could get them over the hump, but kind of off to a tough start so far, and pressure has been the major issue here for Matt Ryan and this Colts offensive line. In fact, look at last week. He was under pressure on 14 of his dropbacks, and on those snaps, he completed just 2 of 9 passes for 18 yards, 3 interceptions, and he was sacked 5 times. It's very strange, though, because this Colts squad values their offensive line so much. They've invested draft capital and money into their offensive line, and so far it just hasn't worked out.
That's the most perplexing issue about the 0-1-1 Colts is the offensive line. Quentin Nelson, something, is the best guard in the league at the left guard. Olathe South Falcon, Braden Smith is at the right tackle. High-price center. You're right. They spend $42 million on the offensive line, more than any team in the league. They allocate more of their salary cap to the O-line than any team in the league, and yet they're getting worked. Jacksonville worked these guys. 7 sacks on Ryan, almost 20 hits in the first 2 weeks of the season. It doesn't add up. Going back to Jonathan Taylor, he's number 1 in the NFL, Matt, with 5 negative runs. Yeah. He just can't get going because there's somebody at his legs. So, again, curious how they will attack the Chiefs, but that offensive line is playing with their pride wounded over the last 2 weeks.
Now, there is some good news for the Colts. They're likely getting Michael Pittman Jr. back at wide receiver here today. He's their go-to receiver. Look at week 1. He had 9 catches for 121 yards and a touchdown. Had a quad injury, though, that kept him out of the Jacksonville game last week, and man, was it apparent when he was not out there. This Colts offense really struggled without him against Jacksonville. Just 9 first downs all game last week for the Colts. They never scored, so really tough not having him in that game. He's likely back here today. That's a big deal for this offense.
It is. Catch radius, the ability to go deep, I mentioned, and then the play action pass. These corners and safeties are thinking they got to help in the run game. It goes back to what I mentioned a little bit ago. But you cannot get so bought into the run game that you don't forget about Pittman over the top and his catch radius. He's a little bit of a Mike Williams here, like the Chargers guy, in the fact that I can be in the perfect spot defensively, but because of his wingspan and his radius, he'll still make a play. He's very dangerous.
Yeah, he's really the focal point of this passing attack. It says a lot that he didn't play last week, and yet he still is second on this team in receptions and receiving yards. So keep your eye out for Michael Pittman. Now let's talk a bit about this Chiefs offense, because we've seen kind of 2 sides of it so far this season, and I think both are encouraging. So in week 1, it was unstoppable. I mean, everything was on schedule. Everything was perfect. 33 first downs, more than 450 yards of offense. They were awesome. Everything was clicking. last week was a bit ugly at times, right? This Chargers defense is really good that they were facing, but they didn't let it get them down. They kept firing through, they kept powering through, they grinded through it. Very encouraging to see this defense, or this offense rather, when defenses are finding ways to try to stop them, they don't let it stop them the entire game. They find a way in the end.
Very subtle stories developing here, and the rest of the league hasn't picked up on it yet, but it's the additional step for Patrick Mahomes. If you get a chance, listen to the interview I had with him on the Chiefs Kingdom radio show Monday night. It's archived. Just find it. But he won a fantasy game the first week. Everything was working and clicking. It wasn't against a great Charger defense on that Thursday night game, but Mahomes kept grinding. Where he's at, staying in his protection, staying in the pocket when he needs to be, still making the off-schedule throw like the play to McKinnon for a touchdown, making the on-schedule throw like the throw to Watson for 41 yards, the on-schedule throw 30 yards to McCole Hardman. But not that he's not been mature, it's just the next step for him. Matt Nagy's part of it. I talked to Nags about it. I talked to EB about it. I talked to Coach Reed about it. Yes, it's very real. We've seen it. You and I saw it over the last 5 months. It's the next step for Patrick Mahomes. He's shown that in the first 2 weeks. I look for him to show it even further today.
The guy just never gives up, no matter the circumstances, and nobody gets off to a better start than Patrick Mahomes. In fact, he is tied for the NFL lead with 7 touchdown passes this year. And get this is the 3rd season of his career in which he has thrown for at least 7 touchdowns without an interception through the first 2 games of the season. Done that 3 times. The rest of the NFL since 2018 has combined to do it 1 time. It was Lamar Jackson back in 2019. So Mahomes, who has been a starter for 5 years now, has done that 3 times. Everyone else, just 1 time. Nobody gets off to a better start.
And I don't want, not a spoiler alert here, but you want to listen to my open for the radio broadcast today about 10 minutes or so before kickoff. Just listen to it, because I've got a Matt stat for you. We'll do it in a creative way, but it's one of the more eye-popping Patrick Mahomes stats of all of his stats. And so it deals with today, this time of year. It's pretty amazing. But, again, he's so comfortable in not getting a big stat game, just like against the Chargers. And I mentioned he's the 10-year-old kid. Come to Pat's place and play. Well, this team is rallying around him, but he's actually rallying to them as well.
And he keeps spreading the football around, too, which all offseason long, everyone kept wondering who's the number 1 wide receiver. And he kept saying, everybody, I'm going to spread the football all over the place. Can we believe him now? Because in the first 2 games, exactly 9 pass catchers have caught a pass in each of these first 2 games. So he's spreading the football all over the place. The defense has no idea who's going to catch the ball on each play, which is what you want. And we also saw the running game get going a little bit, which is going to help him out. Clyde Edwards-Helaire last week averaged more than 9 yards per rush. Also, that 52-yard rush at the end of the game helped seal it. That's a beautiful thing.
Clyde's playing, I think, the best football since he's been here, but he's healthy and he's confident. But it's not just Clyde. It's Pacheco. Look at the plays he's made. It's also McKinnon. Look at the plays he's made. And even Michael Burton, throw him in there. Very effective. But the Chiefs are the only team in the National Football League where 6 different guys have touchdown catches in the first 2 weeks of the year. They're the only team in the league that has 7 guys with at least 5 targets. And they're 4th in the league in 8 20-plus yard passing receptions, but that's come from 6 different guys. I mean, that just to your point, it takes it even further that this team's even more dangerous because they can attack you laterally, they can attack you vertically, horizontally, and with a whole bunch of different guys. They're more difficult to defend now than they have been the last 3 years.
Now, the Chiefs are, of course, facing a very good defense here today with a lot of talent. And for more on that defense and the challenge that they pose, I caught up with former Chief Mitchell Schwartz earlier this week. All right, we're joined now by one of the greatest offensive linemen of his generation, a 4-time All-Pro and a Super Bowl champ. It's Mitchell Schwartz. And Mitchell, I want to ask you about the defensive line for the Colts, because they've really invested a lot of money, a lot of draft capital into their defensive front with guys like DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, Yannick Ngakoue. Just 4 pressures last week against the Jaguars, though, not really what they're used to. How can the Chiefs find similar success protecting against these guys here today?
Yeah, this defensive line, it's got a bunch of talent and they have good players. For whatever reason, didn't have the success last week that the Colts expected. To me, it kind of starts with Buckner up front. I mean, they traded the first rounder for him. They gave him the big contract. he can be a game wrecker at defensive tackle. I mean, we saw in the Super Bowl when he was with the 49ers, the kind of damage he can do. You know, he's a big, tall guy. He's really strong, but he's got good athleticism too. So being able to have him kind of locked up, those double teams, make sure he's not penetrating through the gaps. I think it kind of starts there. You know, coach puts a big emphasis on, you know, being stout in the middle. We've seen, you know, Creed, Joe Tooney, Trey Smith, those guys have it pretty locked down in the middle. So making sure that he's not getting too much push, and then allowing the tackles to do what they do on the edges. You know, Yannick's a guy that both these guys should be familiar with, and, you know, Pay is a young ascending player, and might be a little bit of trying to figure him out, and, you know, both of those guys not having blocked him too much. But I think our tackles are awesome, and I think they're going to do a good job.
Now, we always talk about pass protection because it's a passing league now, but the Chiefs have really effectively ran the ball the last 2 weeks. Clyde Edwards-Helaire last week averaged more than 9 yards per carry, and of course had the big 52-yarder at the end of the game that helped seal it. As an offensive lineman, how beneficial is it when you're running the ball effectively early on and the defensive line is guessing all game?
Oh, it's awesome. That's what you strive for, is that balance. And, you know, we all know with Coach Reid offenses, balance isn't necessarily going to be 50-50. It's going to lean a little bit more towards the pass. But being able to run efficiently, effectively early in the game, that opens things up, you know, for the offensive line, for the entire offense, but also for Coach. You know, now he's feeling good about the run. He's going to call some more, just feeds into your confidence, feeds into the physicality, and it kind of just goes hand in hand. So anytime you're able to keep the defense on their heels, you know, making sure they're not pinning their ears back, rushing the passer, you know, assuming that the throw is coming, that's a benefit to everybody, but especially for the big guys up front.
Yeah, we've seen that balance through 2 weeks. Hopefully we see it here in this game, and hopefully it leads to a Chiefs victory. Mitchell, awesome stuff, man. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to another good one.
All right, great stuff there from Mitch Schwartz. It was awesome catching up with him. We talk about this all the time with the ambassadors and former players, but I love when former Chiefs still feel a part of all this, and he certainly does.
Yeah, he's wicked smart, as we know, but his heart's really good. And Brooke, his wife's awesome. I'm glad they stayed here in the kingdom. They're such an integral part of so many things, but he's got wisdom, man. When you talk to him and you pay attention to what Mitchell Schwartz says.
Now, great stuff from him as well in his analysis. And I want to ask you about this Colts defense as well, because they're weird. They have a ton of talent, especially up front, but only 4 pressures last week against Jacksonville. Your thoughts on this Colts defense?
Some of that was the game and the way it was dictated, and kind of Jacksonville had control of that game all the way. But this is a dangerous front, I think. DeForest Buckner, we faced him in Super Bowl 54. Kwity Paye, you and I both liked him in our draft analysis when he was coming out last year in the draft. But they got some sneaky guys. Grover Stewart has been a problem for the Chiefs in the past. The 2019 victory by the Colts at GHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium, that weird 1913 game, Grover Stewart was a big part of that. And then other guys like Ifeadi Odenigbo, former Viking Pro Bowler, he'll come in and get a big play for them. So you've got to take care of your business today if you're the Chiefs' offensive line.
And one thing you can do when a team has a very good pass rush and talented players on the defensive line is you can get the football out quickly. And we saw that with the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. Trevor Lawrence last week on throws between 0 and 9 yards of the line of scrimmage, he was 18 for 19 for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns, getting the football out quick. Could see something similar here today.
Yeah, and it's Gus Bradley's defense, a lot of zone here. People think it's all cover 2, Legion of Boom stuff. Not necessarily. They'll play some cover 3, but it still is zone-oriented. They're not going to play you press man a lot, which means you can get some quick throws if you understand it. The other thing about the Chiefs receivers, going back before Schwartz's interview, was this Chiefs receiving core has been crisp when they're route running and understanding where to go on the quick throws. Sometimes that changes on the snap, and so the Chiefs, I think, are ahead of the curve with these new guys of understanding where to go and get there quickly.
Now, we'll get the inactives here in just a couple minutes, but we can talk about a few things that we already know, and that's Harrison Butker and Mike Dana. They're both out here today. No surprises. We knew that on Friday. We'll start with Butker, still nursing that ankle injury. Hopefully we get him back here soon, but that means another day for Matt Amendola, a kicker for the Chiefs, and he was pretty good on Thursday.
Yeah, my favorite stat, though, of the Chiefs right now is the leader in touchbacks is Justin Reed. He's got 5, although Amendola had 4 last week. In this building, in a dome, you think, well, it's easy to kick in here. The roof's open. But if Matt has to make a pressure kick, that's something we don't know yet. He was great last week, but if he's got to fire up a 48-yarder out here inside of 2 minutes, either at the end of the half or the game, we don't know. The Mike Dana injury to me is more problematic than you might think. He's been outstanding, again in a sneaky way. He's the one that hurt Justin Herbert. Herbert may not play today because of Dana's hit, but we saw it all spring, summer, and at training camp. We're going, ooh, Mike Dana's a big part of this defense.
He has 8 pressures already this season. He's been really good. He had 26 pressures all of last season. He's already a third of the way there in just 2 games. So hopefully we get Mike Dana back here shortly. Now looking at the Colts, there's one guy that we thought was going to play here in this game on Friday. Then all of a sudden we learned that he wasn't. That's Shaq Leonard, one of the best linebackers in the NFL, the quarterback of this defense. Shaq Leonard is not going to play in this game with that back injury. That's a big, big deal for this Colts defense.
Is there a better Mike backer in the National Football League at this point? I'm not sure. That's a big one. You alerted me to it early on Friday. But Shaq Leonard, think about the zones that Gus Bradley plays. That's also predicated on linebackers getting to drops. Leonard's a tackle machine. He's just led the NFL, it seems like, getting like 15 tackle games all the time. But his ability to drop into coverage is also very underrated. And they've got good linebackers, but nothing like a Shaq Leonard on the field today.
Certainly not. We just got the inactives here for today's game. Looking at this, Mitch, take a look. Nothing too surprising stands out to me. And this is one of the nice things about when we come into this game and kind of know who's not going to play. Let's see, 91, Yannick Ngakoue. He was a question mark coming into this one. He is not among the inactives. So Yannick Ngakoue, he was questionable coming into this game with a back injury. He's going to go here today. We'll see how effective he can be.
Again, they've got a rotational piece there because they have other guys, so they can spot play him. They don't have to grind him 50 snaps, and that helps. Chiefs are doing the same thing, and they got to overcome that with Dana's injury. But the rotational piece on the edge is effective for both of these teams.
And also reserve offensive tackle Bernard Raymond. He's a rookie. He has an ankle injury. They've been working him in at left tackle at times. Matt Pryor is a starting left tackle, but Raymond's been playing a bit. Their depth there is being challenged up front.
Let me tell you where that's more effective. Again, sneaky. I expected them, still might, of going tackle over tackle. Basically going with 6 offensive linemen, those 2 backs that I mentioned about, forcing the Chiefs to go big. But Raymond's their best 6th lineman. He's their Nick Allegretti. They don't have him. So who else is going to do that? I think they're going to do that too to protect their left tackle. So it's a bigger deal than you might think not having Raymond. We liked him coming out of the draft. But if the Colts go big on the offensive line, they're going to be without one of their better players.
Hopefully an opportunity for this pass rush to keep things going. This Colts team, as you mentioned earlier, they're fighting for their season. They're better than how they've looked the last couple weeks. But the beautiful thing about this Chiefs squad, they're going to be fighting here today as well, and they are up for this challenge. For Mitch Holthus, I'm Matt McMullen. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Let's go get a victory.